first letter and cleared out the wicked man therein referred to, doing all they could to right matters before Jehovah. 2 Co 7. 8-12, int. However, those men were not authorized to carry out on the wrongdoer the full penalty demanded by justice. Full vengeance in putting him to death, as has been the prerogative of the judges under the Mosaic law. The 20. 10. Heb 10. 28 They merely expelled such unrepentant bad persons from the congregation. 1 Co 5. 13 If such ones remained unrepentant, they would eventually receive full justice for their misdeeds in everlasting death. Heb 10. 29, 30 Indeed, the Christian who takes up unrighteousness, as, for example, fornication, is in danger, because Jehovah is one who exacts punishment literally, is the avenger for all these things. 1th 4. 3-6, int. Rulers. Governmental rulers, whose duty it is to see that justice is carried out, may be the ones who execute vengeance upon evildoers, including any Christians who break the laws of the land that are in harmony with what is right and that are consistent with the authority allowed those rulers by God. In such case, these rulers are indirectly executing God's vengeance, as the Apostle Paul writes. For those ruling are an object of fear, not to the good deed, but to the bad. It is God's minister, and avenger to express wrath upon the one practicing what is bad. Row 13. 3, 4. 1 Pe 2. 13, 14. Compare GE 9. 6. Imperfect man's tendency to seek vengeance. It is a tendency of fallen, imperfect men to seek vengeance upon those who do them injustice or upon persons whom they hate. The man who commits adultery with another man's wife is in danger of retributive vengeance from the husband, as O textoi acute miritra longo, versions 1151 him. La 26. 25 But those nations, on their part, acted because of hatred and malice, expressing their own vengefulness, and for this Jehovah, in turn, took vengeance upon them. La 3. 60. As 25. 12-17. See also Avenger of Blood. Cities of Refuge. Venom. Poisonous fluid secreted by certain snakes and some other creatures. New 21. 4-9. 8. 15. Act 28. 3-6 One Hebrew word for the venom of reptiles is chamiddle.mada 32. 24, which is also used to denote rage, fury, and the like. De 29. 28. As 19. 12 It is from a root meaning be hot to 19. 6 And may allude to the inflammation or burning sensation associated with the bite of a venomous snake. Another Hebrew word rosh, or raush is applied to the poison, or venom, of cobras, poisoned water, and a poisonous plant. De 32. 32, 33. Job 20. 16. Jurate. 14. 9. 15. 23. 15. Blow 3. 19. Sea cobra. Poisonous plant. Viper, horned. Though some animal poisons may seem to be only for protection or killing, of interest is this statement by H. Munro Fox. In some cases we know that poisons play a role in the functioning of the body of the animal which manufactures them. In many instances this may be the real raison de circumflexity reason for existence of the venoms, quite apart from any protective value. The poisonous spittle of snakes, for example, has work to do in the digestion of the snake's food. Marvels and Mysteries of Our Animal World, by the Reader's Digest Association, 1964, p. 259. Figurative use. The lying, slanderous statements of the wicked, so damaging to the victim's reputation, are likened to the deadly venom of the serpent. PS 58. 3, 4 Of slanderers, it is said, the venom of the horned viper is under their lips or, behind their lips, even as the viper's venom gland lies behind the lip and fangs of its upper jaw. PS 140. 3. Row 3. 13 The human tongue, misused in slanderous, backbiting, false teaching, or similarly harmful speech, is full of death-dealing poison. Just 3. 8. Vermilion. See colors. Versions. Translations of the Bible from Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek into other tongues. Translation work has made the Word of God available to thousands of millions of persons unable to understand the original biblical languages. The early versions of the Scriptures were handwritten and were therefore in the form of manuscripts. However, since the advent of the printing press, many additional versions, or translations, have appeared, and these have generally been published in great quantities. Some versions have been prepared directly from Hebrew and Greek Bible texts, whereas others are based on earlier translations. Chart, Volume 1, p. 321. The Scriptures have been published, the whole or in part, in more than 3,000 languages. From the standpoint of language coverage, this means that about 90% of the Earth's population can have access to at least some part of the Bible. An account of versions, or translations, of the Scriptures will engender gratitude to Jehovah God for the wonderful way in which He has preserved His Word for the benefit of mankind's millions. Ancient versions of the Hebrew Scriptures. Extant today are possibly 6,000 ancient manuscripts of all or portions of the Hebrew Scriptures, written in Hebrew with the exception of a few Aramaic sections. Known to be still in existence are also many manuscripts of old versions, or translations, of the Hebrew Scriptures in various languages. Some versions were in themselves translations of earlier translations from the Hebrew. For instance, the Hebrew Scripture portion of the Old Latin version was rendered from the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures. On the other hand, some ancient versions of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Greek Septuagint, Aramaic Targums, the Syriac Peshitta, and the Latin Vulgate were made directly from the Hebrew and not through the medium of a version in Greek or some other language. Samaritano Textoi Acute Longo, versions 1152 assumed their present form no earlier than about the 5th century CE. One of the principal Targums, the Targum of Enkelos on the Pentateuch, is rather literal. Another, the so-called Targum of Jonathan for the Prophets, is less literal. Extant today are Targums on most books of the Hebrew Scriptures except Ezra, Nehemiah, and Daniel. The Greek Septuagint. The Greek Septuagint, often designated LXX, was used by Greek-speaking Jews and Christians in Egypt and elsewhere. Reportedly, work on it commenced in Egypt in the days of Ptolemy Philadelphus 285,246 BCE when, according to tradition, the Pentateuch thereof was translated into Greek by 72 Jewish scholars. Later, the number 70 somehow came to be used, and the version of the Pentateuch was referred to as the Septuagint, meaning 70. The other books of the Hebrew Scriptures by various translators, whose style varied from quite literal to rather free rendition, were gradually added until translation of the entire Hebrew Scriptures had finally been completed during the 2nd century BCE, and perhaps by 150 BCE thereafter the entire work came to be known as the Septuagint. This version is often quoted by writers of the Christian Greek Scriptures. Apocryphal writings were evidently inserted in the Greek Septuagint sometime after it was first completed. See Apocrypha. One of the oldest extant manuscripts of the Greek Septuagint is Papyrus 957, the Rylands Papyrus 3. 458, preserved in the John Rylands Library, Manchester, England. It is of the 2nd century BCE and consists of fragments of Deuteronomy 23, 24, 24, 3, 25, 1-3, 26, 12, 17-19, 28, 31-33. Another manuscript, of the 1st century BCE is Papyrus Fuad 266 possessed by the Société Égyptienne de Papyrologie, Cairo, containing parts of the second half of Deuteronomy according to the Greek Septuagint. In various places therein, the tetragrammaton E in English of the divine name is found in a form of square Hebrew characters right within the Greek script. See Picture, Volume 1, p. 326. Jehovah. The Greek Septuagint has thus been preserved in numerous manuscripts, many fragmentary, others fairly complete. Notably, the Septuagint texts are preserved in the 3 famous uncial manuscripts written on vellum. The Vatican manuscript No. 1209 and the Sinaitic manuscript, both of the 4th century CE and the Alexandrine manuscript of the 5th century CE. The Septuagint is found in the Vatican manuscript No. 1209 is almost complete. Part of the Hebrew scriptures once included in the Sinaitic manuscript has been lost. That in the Alexandrine manuscript is rather complete, though lacking parts of Genesis, 1 Samuel, and Psalms. Later Greek versions. In the 2nd century, Aquila, a Jewish proselyte of Pontus, made a new and very literal Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures. Except for fragments and quotations thereof by early writers, it has perished. Another Greek translation of the same century was produced by Theodotion. His was apparently a revision of the Septuagint or some other Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures, though he considered the Hebrew text itself. No complete copy of Theodotion's version is extant. Another Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures of which no complete copy is extant was that of Symmachus. His rendition, probably translated about 200 CE, endeavored to convey the right sense rather than to be literal. About 245 CE Origen, the noted scholar of Alexandria, Egypt, completed a mammoth multiple version of the Hebrew scriptures called the Hexapla, which means sixfold. Though fragments of it are extant, no complete manuscript copy has survived. Origen arranged the text in 6 parallel columns containing 1 the consonantal Hebrew text, 2 a Greek transliteration of the Hebrew text, 3 Aquila's Greek version, 4 Symmachus' Greek version, 5 the Septuagint, revised by Origen to correspond au texto acute miritra longo. Versions 1153 renditions of other books of the Christian Greek scriptures once existed, but there are no extant manuscripts thereof. All books of the Christian Greek scriptures except 2 Peter, 2 and 3 John, Jude, and Revelation were included in the Syriac Peshitta of the 5th century. In about 508 CE Philoxenus, Bishop of Hierapolis, had Polycarp make a revision of the Peshitta Christian scriptures, and it was the first time 2 Peter, 2 and 3 John, Jude, and Revelation were added to a Syriac version. The Christian Greek scriptures had already been translated into Latin by the end of the 2nd century CE. They were also available in Egyptian by about the middle of the 3rd century. Ancient versions of the entire Bible. The Peshitta of Syriac-speaking people professing Christianity was in general use from the 5th century CE onward. The word Peshitta means simple. The Hebrew scripture portion was basically a translation from the Hebrew, probably made during the 2nd or 3rd century CE, though a later revision involved comparison with the Septuagint. Numerous Peshitta manuscripts are extant, the most valuable being a 6th or 7th century codex preserved at the Ambrosian Library in Milan, Italy. One Peshitta manuscript of the Pentateuch lacking Leviticus has a signed date corresponding to about 464 CE, and a palimpsest with Isaiah has the date 459,460 CE signed, making them the oldest dated Bible manuscripts in any tongue. Old Latin. This is the collective title Vetus Latina for the texts that reflect Latin translations generally prior to Jerome's Vulgate. These probably appeared from the latter part of the 2nd century CE onward, but the earliest evidence of the Latin Bible is from Carthage, North Africa, at least by 250 CE. The Hebrew scriptures were translated into Latin from the Greek Septuagint, not yet revised by Origen, but the Christian scriptures were rendered from the original Greek. Scholars usually refer to 2 basic types of Old Latin text: the African and the European. The earliest extant biblical manuscripts date from the 4th and 5th centuries CE Latin Vulgate. The Latin Vulgate Vulgata Latina is a version of the entire Bible by the foremost biblical scholar of that time, Eusebius Hieronymus, better known as Jerome. He first undertook a revision of the Old Latin version of the Christian scriptures in comparison with the Greek text. He began with the Gospels, which were published in 383 or 384 CE. Just when he completed his revision of the Old Latin Christian scriptures is uncertain. Between about 384 and 390 CE he made 2 revisions of the Old Latin Psalms, based on the Greek Septuagint. The first is now lost, but what is called the Roman Psalter may represent the Old Latin text he corrected. The second is called the Gallican Psalter, named for its adoption in Gaul. Jerome also translated the Psalms directly from Hebrew, this work being called the Hebrew Psalter. He began to revise other books of the Hebrew scriptures from the Greek, but apparently never completed such a revision, preferring to translate directly from Hebrew, though also referring to Greek versions. Jerome labored on his Latin translation from the Hebrew from about 390 to 405 CE. Jerome's version was originally received with general hostility, and only gradually did it gain wide approval. With its later general acceptance in Western Europe, it came to be called the Vulgate, denoting a commonly received version, the Latin Vulgatus meaning common, well known. Jerome's original translation underwent revisions, the Roman Catholic Church making the one of 1592 its standard edition. Thousands of Vulgate manuscripts are extant today. Other ancient translations. As Christianity spread, other versions were required. At least by the 3rd century CE, the first translation of the Christian Greek scriptures O Textoi Acute Muritra Longo, Vessels 1154. Perhaps about the 4th or 5th century CE there are several old Arabic versions of the scriptures. Translations of parts of the Bible into Arabic may date from as early as the 7th century CE, but the earliest record is that of a version made in Spain in 724 CE. The Slavonic version was made in the 9th century CE, and has been attributed to two brothers, Cyril and Methodius. Vessels. Hollow receptacles, some having lids. New 19. 15. Used to hold liquids or dry materials. 1 Chi 17. 10. As 1. 7. J 40. 10. Many were made of clay, wood, metal, or stone. A 6. 28. 15. 12. New 7. 85. 1 Chi 10. 21. Mount 26. 7 common containers included jars and vessels of the bowl sort. Issa 22. 24. Bags or sacks. Ge 42. 25. Hag 1. 6. Baskets. Mr. 8. 19. 20. 2 Co 11. 33. Skin bottles. JG 4. 19. U 5. 37, 38, and buckets. New 24. 7. Joe 4. 11. Sea utensils. Jars, jugs, and flasks. The jar, generally a deep cylindrical vessel having 1, 2, or even 4 handles, was usually earthenware. Is a 30. 14. Bar 4. 2 and, sometimes, made of stone. Joe 2. 6. A common large jar in the days of the kingdoms of Judah and of Israel may have been approximately 65 centimeters 25 inches high with a diameter of about 40 centimeters 16 inches. Some jars were equipped with spouts. 2 Chi 4. 2 jars might be kept on a standler. 11. 35 and were used to hold such liquids as water or oil. 1 Chi 18. 33. 2 Chi 4. 2. Large ones often being employed for wine. 1 So 10. 3. 25. 18. 2 So 16. 1. J 13. 12. Also dry materials, such as flour, were stored in jars. 1 Chi 17. 12. Sometimes documents, including deeds of purchase, were placed in earthenware jars, or vessels, for safekeeping. J 32. 13-15. A number of ancient manuscripts were thus preserved in jars in the Qumran area near the Dead Sea, among the manuscripts being the well-known Dead Sea Scroll of Isaiah. Water jugs. 1 So 26. 11, 12, 16. 1 Chi 19. 6 and flasks. 1 So 10. 1. 1 Chi 14. 3. 2 Chi 9. 3. J 19. 1, 10 were commonly earthenware. Bowls, dishes, and platters. Bowls were used to hold such liquids as wine. M6. 6, milk. JG 5. 25, and water. JG 6. 38. They were made of clay, stone, and metal. Some banquet bowls were ceramic. As indicated by finds of archaeologists, in the days of the kingdoms of Judah and of Israel, ceramic bowls averaged about 20 centimeters 8 inches in height, had a diameter inside the rim of approximately 40 centimeters 16 inches, and sometimes had 4 handles. In comparison with bowls, dishes and platters likely were shallow. X 25. 29. 37. 16. New 4. 7. 7. 84, 85. Mount 14. 8, 11. Mr. 6. 25, 28. Cups. The cup, a comparatively small vessel for drinking liquids, was usually made of clay, though sometimes of metal. PR 23. 31. J 35. 5. Mr. 9. 41. Some cups were molded to fit the hand. Usually they were handleless shallow bowls. Those equipped with handles could also serve as dippers. Figurative use. The congregator indicated that at death the jar at the spring is broken. Apparently this jar is the heart, which in death ceases to receive and transmit the flow of blood throughout the body. It becomes as useless as a broken jar that can hold no water. Also the brain, alluded to in connection with the figure of a golden bowl, evidently the cranium with its brain content, ceases to function and undergoes dissolution, gets crushed. EC 12. 6, 7. Vessels. The scriptures often refer to people as vessels. Act 9. 15. Christians are frail earthen vessels entrusted with a glorious treasure, the ministry. 2 Co 4. 7. Women are designated as the weaker vessel. Therefore, Christian husbands, by taking into consideration their wives' physical and biological limitations, as did Jehovah in the law given to Israel 18. 19. 20. 18. Act according to knowledge, assigning them honor as to a weaker vessel, the feminine one. 1 P 3. 7. An individual should keep separate from vessels lacking honor, persons who do not conduct themselves aright, and should pursue a course in harmony with Jehovah's O text to acute miritra longo. Vine 1155 edition would bring to God. Jesus prayed that this cup pass away from him, if possible. Nevertheless, he was willing to submit to Jehovah's will and drink it. Mount 26. 39, 42. Joe 18. 10, 11. Jehovah's assigned portion, or cup, for Jesus meant not only suffering, but also Jesus' baptism into death, climaxed by his being resurrected to immortal life in heaven. Luke 12. 50. Row 6. 4, 5. Heb 5. 7. It was, therefore, also the cup of grand salvation for Christ. PS 116. 13. According to the divine will, the cup that Jesus Christ was given to drink he also shares with the little flock of his joint heirs of the kingdom. Luke 12. 32. Mr. 10. 35-40. Village. Sea city. Vine. A plant with long, slender twining stems that creep along the ground or climb by means of tendrils, the most common variety being the grapevine Vitis vinifera. The Hebrew word Jephon generally refers to the wine vine. New 6. 4. JG 13. 14, an exception being the wild vine that produced wild goods. 2 Chi 4. 39. The Greek word nampe-los refers to the grapevine, and the word nam-pe-lon refers to a vineyard. The history of viticulture begins with the statement, Noah proceeded to plant a vineyard. Ge 9. 20. Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine to set before Abraham, proving that grapes were grown in the land of Canaan before 1933 BCE. Ge 14. 18. Egyptian inscriptions depict grape picking and the treading of wine presses in the 2nd millennium BCE. The pharaohs of the time had official cupbearers. Ge 40. 9-13, 20-23. The Egyptian winemaking industry, however, suffered a severe blow when Jehovah went killing their vine with a plague of hail. PS 78. 47. 105. 33. The spies who entered the promised land, a land of vines and figs and pomegranates, brought back from the torrent valley of Eshcol a cluster of grapes so large that it had to be carried on a bar between 2 men. 8. 8. New 13. 20, 23, 26. Grape clusters from this region are commonly said to weigh 4.5 to 5.5 kilograms, 10 to 12 pounds. One cluster was recorded as weighing 12 kilograms 26 pounds. Another, more than 20 kilograms 44 pounds. Besides the torrent valley of Eshcol, other grape-growing regions mentioned in the Bible are Engedi by the Dead Sea 1. 14, Shechem JG 9. 26, 27, Silo JG 21. 20, 21, and across the Jordan, Sibmah, Heshbon, and Elilah. Issa 16. 7-10. Jah 48. 32. Planting and care. Vineyards were often planted on hillsides. It was customary to fence or wall in vineyards new 22. 24. PR 24. 30, 31 and also to build booths or watchtowers Issa 1. 8. 5. 2 to protect the vineyards against thieves or animal intruders such as foxes and wild boars. PS 80. 8, 13. K2. 15. The Mosaic law allowed a passerby to eat his fill, but not to carry any off in a receptacle, for it would be thievery. D 23. 24. For convenience a winepress and a vat were dug near the vineyard, since usually the bulk of the crop was crushed to make wine. Issa 5. 2. Mr. 12. 1. Sea wine and strong drink. Of course, fresh grapes were eaten in considerable quantity, and some sun-dried raisins were produced. 1 Sir 25. 18. 30. 12. 2 Sir 16. 1. 1 Ch 12. 40. Ancient vineyards were laid out in several different ways. Sometimes the vines were systematically planted in rows 2.5 meters, 8 feet or more apart in well-prepared soil. No other seeds were to be planted in a vineyard. According to the Mosaic law, the trees, such as the fig, might be planted there. D 22. 9. Lu 13. 6, 7. Sometimes the vines were allowed to grow along the ground down a hillside, with only the clusters being raised by forked sticks, but more often the vines were trained over wooden arbors or piles of stones. Pruning is necessary for production of good grapes. Jesus said that every branch not bearing fruit he takes away, and every one bearing fruit he cleans by pruning, that it may bear more fruit. Job 15. 2. The pruning of productive branches and the cutting off of fruitless O textoi acute miritra longo. Vinegar 1156 9. 27. Issa 16. 10. Jah 25. 30. Cypress. It was also a joyful time for the poor and alien residents of the land, who were permitted to glean the vineyards after the general harvest. The 19. 10. The 24. 21. The opposite was also true. When the vines had withered, or when they produced no grapes, or when the vineyards became desolate wastes of thorns, these were calamitous times of great sorrow. Issa 24. 7. 32. 10, 12, 13. Jah 8. 13. Sabbatical laws required owners to leave their vineyards uncultivated, and pruned, and unharvested every 7th year and during the Jubilee. La 25. 3-5, 11. But during those years any persons owners, slaves, aliens, the poor, as well as the animals, were welcome to eat freely of what grew by itself. X 23. 10, 11. La 25. 1-12. Illustrative and figurative use. The familiarity of the grapevine. The general knowledge people had of its cultivation and productivity as well as the vintage and the gleaning activities connected therewith, made it an object of frequent reference by Bible writers. Vineyards producing an abundance of fruitage reflected Jehovah's blessing. La 26. 5. Hag 2. 19. Zakat. 12. Mal 3. 11. PS 128. 3. The expression sitting everyone under his own vine and under his own fig tree became proverbial of peace and security. 1 Kai 4. 25. 2 Kai 18. 31. Issa 36. 16. Mick 4. 4. Zek 3. 10. Unproductive vines would be a manifestation of God's disfavor. De 28. 39. Israel was like the grapes in the wilderness, but it became like a degenerate vine. Ho 9. 10. 10. 1. Like a foreign vine producing wild grapes. Issa 5. 4. J 2. 21. A common proverbial saying in the time of Jeremiah and Ezekiel referred to the fact that unripe grapes set the teeth on edge, because of their sourness. J 31. 29, 30. As 18. 2. Attempts have been made to link the vine of Sodom with various plants found native to the Dead Sea area, but the setting of this expression in its only occurrence to 32. 32 clearly indicates a figurative use. Sodom is repeatedly used in the Bible to represent moral corruption and wickedness. Issa 1. 10. 3. 9. J 23. 14. Jesus spoke on a number of occasions about vineyards and their grapes. Mount 20. 1-16. Just 3 days before his death, he gave the illustration of the wicked cultivators. Mr. 12. 1-9. Lu 20. 9-16. See illustrations. When instituting the Lord's evening meal, Jesus used wine, the product of the vine, as a symbol of his blood of the covenant. On that final night of his earthly life, he also spoke of himself as the true vine and of his Father as the cultivator. His disciples he likened to the branches who would be either pruned so as to bear more fruit or lopped off completely. Mount 26. 27-29. Mr. 14. 24, 25. Lu 22. 18. Joe 15. 1-10. Prophetic use. When Jacob blessed Judah, there was prophetic meaning in his words. Tying his full-grown ass to a vine leg Jephunneh the descendant of his own she-ass to a choice vine wayless so re he will certainly wash his clothing in wine and his garment in the blood of grapes. Dark red are his eyes from wine. Ge 49. 8-12 The Hebrew word so re denotes a red vine yielding the richest or choicest fruit. Compare Issa 5. 2. J 2. 21, where the related term Sarek occurs. A few days before the sign reading the King of the Jews was posted above him on the torture stake. Mr. 15. 26, Jesus Christ, who was of the tribe of Judah, rode into Jerusalem on a colt, the foal of an ass, thereby being presented to Jerusalem as her king. Mount 21. 1-9. Zek 9. 9 While Jesus did not tie the colt of the she-ass to a literal vine, he did bind his kingly claims to a symbolic vine, a spiritual one, namely, God's kingdom. Compare Mount 21. 41-43. Joe 15. 1-5. In addition to this greater significance, Jacob's prophecy had a literal application in the inheritance given to the tribe of Judah in the Promised Land. This included the mountainous region, with its productive valleys and elevated O-textoid acute muritra longo, Virgin 1157 Li sodium carbonate, a reaction apparently alluded to at Proverbs 25. 20. When Jesus Christ was on earth, the Roman soldiers drank a thin, tart, or sour, wine known in Latin as acetum vinegar, or as posca, when it was diluted with water. This was likely the drink offered to Jesus Christ while he was on the torture stake. Jesus refused the sour wine drugged with myrrh or gall that was presented to him to alleviate his suffering. Mr. 15. 23. Mount 27. 34. Compare PS 69. 21. However, just before he expired, he received plain sour wine from a sponge when it was put to his mouth. Joe 19. 28-30. Lu 23. 36, 37. Vine of Sodom. Sea vine. Vineyard. Sea vine. Viperheb. F middle.a. Tsip middle.o middle.ni. Gr. Ik middle.dna. a poisonous snake equipped with highly specialized fangs that can be tilted back against the roof of the mouth when they are not being used. The venom of vipers varies according to types, several of which exist in Palestine. One of the most dangerous is the sand viper Vipera amodites of the Jordan Valley. Another kind is the Palestine viper Vipera palestina. The Hebrew f-A is commonly connected with the Arabic afan, which refers to the carpet viper, a poisonous snake of the sandy Jericho plains. The potency of the viper's poison is alluded to at Job 20. 16, where Zophar speaks of the tongue of the viper as having the power to kill. Shipwrecked on the island of Malta, the Apostle Paul was collecting a bundle of sticks and laying them upon a fire when a viper came out and fastened itself on Paul's hand. However, Paul shook the venomous creature off into the fire and suffered no harm, though the people standing by expected Paul to swell up with inflammation or suddenly die. Act 28. 3-6. Illustrative use. The dangerous bite of the viper is used in an illustrative way at Proverbs 23:32, where the wise man describes the effects of the excessive use of wine, saying, "It bites just like a serpent, and it secretes poison just like a viper heb." U.Ketsup.O.Ni. Describing the wickedness that God's people Israel had come to practice, the prophet Isaiah wrote, "The eggs of a poisonous snake are what they have hatched. Anyone eating some of their eggs would die, and the egg that was smashed would be hatched into a viper." Isra 59. 5. Most snakes lay eggs, and while the majority of the vipers are not oviparous egg-laying, certain types are. John the Baptizer called the Pharisees and Sadducees offspring of vipers. Mount 3. 7. Luke 3. 7. And Jesus Christ called the scribes and Pharisees offspring of vipers, because of their wickedness and the deadly spiritual harm they could inflict upon unsuspecting persons. Mount 12. 34. 23. 33. Viper, horned heb. Shove. Shafifin. One of the viperous poisonous snakes that inhabit Palestine, distinguished by a small pointed horn above each eye. Raymond Ditmaz reports that the horned viper Cerastes cornutus is found in Africa from Algeria to Egypt, and also in Arabia and Palestine. Because the venom of the horned viper is potent, though not usually fatal to humans, David fittingly speaks of violent men as having sharpened their tongue like that of a serpent. The venom of the horned viper is under their lips. PS 140. 3. Sea asp. Reaching a maximum length of about 0.8 meters, 2.5 feet, the horned viper is of a pale, sandy hue and thus conceals itself in sand, waiting for prey. The untrained eye finds it most difficult to spot a lurking horned viper. In his book Reptiles of the World 1953, pages 234, 235, Raymond Ditmaz describes some horned vipers he saw in captivity. Like all desert vipers, they were continually seeking to throw sand over their backs, thus hiding their bodies. If the cage were to be provided with several inches of fine sand, nothing would be seen of the snakes during the day but the tops of their heads. In shoveling sand, the reptile flattens the body to such an extent, the lower edge acts as otex to a acute muritra longo, Vision 1158 GE 24. 16. The 32. 25. JG 21. 12. 1 Chi 1. 2. As 2. 2, 3, 17. Bar 1. 18. 2. 21. The Greek term par middle dot the numbers, however, can apply to both single men and single women. Mount 25. 1-12. Boo 1. 27. Act 21. 9. 1 Co 7. 25, 36-38. According to the law, a man who seduced an unengaged virgin had to give her father 50 silver shekels $110, was to marry her if her father permitted, and was not allowed to divorce her all his days. X 22. 16, 17. De 22. 28, 29. But an engaged virgin, being viewed as already belonging to a husband, was to be stoned to death if she did not scream when sexually attacked. Her failure to scream would have denoted consent and thus would have constituted her an adulteress, de 22. 23, 24. Compare Mount 1. 18, 19. The fact that an engaged virgin was regarded as being owned by a husband also explains why Joel 1. 8 could refer to a virgin as wailing over the owner of her youth. As greater freedom in the Lord's service is enjoyed by those retaining their virginity, the Apostle Paul recommended singleness as the better course for Christians having self-control. 1 Cor 7. 25-35. However, regarding those lacking self-control, he observed, "If anyone thinks he is behaving improperly toward his virginity, if that is past the bloom of youth, and this is the way it should take place, let him do what he wants. He does not sin. Let them marry." 1 Cor 7. 36. The Greek word rendered virginity at 1 Corinthians 7. 36-38 literally means virgin. For this reason the thought has been advanced that Paul was talking about a father's or guardian's duty toward a marriageable daughter. Thus the Jerusalem Bible reads, "If there is anyone who feels that it would not be fair to his daughter to let her grow too old for marriage, and that he should do something about it, he is free to do as he likes. He is not sinning if there is a marriage." Another view is that this text pertains to a man's deciding to marry the girl to whom he is engaged. The American translation states, "If a man thinks he is not acting properly toward the girl to whom he is engaged, if his passions are too strong, and that is what ought to be done, let him do as he pleases. It is no sin. Let them be married." The context, however, suggests that the reference is not to a virgin girl, but to a person's own virginity. One commentator observed, "I think the apostle is here continuing his former discourse, and advising unmarried persons, who are at their own disposal, what to do. The man's virgin being meant of his virginity." Matthew Henry's Commentary on the Whole Bible, 1976, Volume 3, p. 1036. Since the Greek word par middle dot the numbers can include a single man, the rendering virginity, as found in the translations by J.B. Rotherham and J.N. Darby as well as in the New World Translation, is appropriate and seems to fit the context best. Spiritual virginity. Even as the high priest in Israel could take only a virgin as his wife. 21. 10, 13, 14. Compare as 44. 22. So the great high priest, Jesus Christ, must have only a virgin as his spiritual bride in heaven. Re 21. 9. Heb 7. 26. Compare F5. 25-30. Hence, the Apostle Paul was deeply concerned about the purity of the Corinthian congregation, desiring to present it as a chaste virgin to the Christ. 2 Cor 11. 2-6 The bride of Christ is composed of 144,000 spirit-anointed persons who individually maintain their virginity by remaining separate from the world and by keeping themselves morally and doctrinally pure. Re 14. 1, 4. Compare 1 Cor 5. 9-13. 6. 15-20. Just 4. 4. 2 Joe 8-11. Messianic prophecy. Although the Hebrew word Beth-middle-lo means virgin, another term Amir appears at Isaiah 7. 14. Look. The maiden Ha-middle-el-middle-ma herself will actually become pregnant, and she is giving birth to a son, and she will certainly call his name Emmanuel. The word Amma means maiden and can apply to a non-virgin or a virgin. It is applied to the maiden Rebecca before marriage. O texto e acute miritra longo, Vision 11:59 described in the Bible, and at times they are combined. When a person received a vision from God during waking hours, it appears that the impression was made upon the conscious mind. The vision could later be recalled and described or recorded by the recipient, in his own words. Some persons, such as Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, also had nocturnal visions, or visions of the night. These seem to have been impressed upon the subconscious mind while the recipient slept. Trance. Apparently God's Spirit at times superimposed on the mind a picture of God's purpose or a vision while the person was in a trance, a state of deep concentration or a sleep-like condition. The Greek word rendered trance in the Christian scriptures is exstation middle.sis. Defined literally as a putting away or displacement, it carries the figurative idea of a throwing of the mind out of its normal state. An individual in a trance would be oblivious of his literal surroundings and would be receptive to a vision. Act 22. 17, 18. Assurances of divine favor. Certain visions from God revealed to Jehovah's servants how he was dealing with them and gave them assurance of divine favor. The word of Jehovah came to Abraham in a vision, and the patriarch was assured. Do not fear, Abram. I am a shield for you. Your reward will be very great. G 15. 1 Thereafter, Jehovah made a covenant with Abraham. G 15. 2-21 Some years later, God talked to Jacob in visions of the night, telling him not to be afraid to go down to Egypt, for God would constitute him a great nation there and would eventually bring him up from that land. G 46. 1-4. Compare 2-7. 1-17. 1-17. 1-15. Direction in serving the divine purpose. Some visions from God gave the recipients direction in the doing of Jehovah's will. After the glorified Jesus Christ appeared to Saul of Tarsus, Saul, though temporarily blinded, had a vision in which he saw a man named Ananias lay his hands upon him so that he might recover sight. Also by means of a vision, Ananias was directed to the very house where Saul was in Damascus. Act 9. 1-19. In Caesarea in 36 CE the devout Gentile Cornelius received a vision in which an angel told him to send to Joppa for Simon Peter. Act 10. 1-8 At Joppa, Peter fell into a trance and had a vision in which he saw descending from heaven a vessel containing various unclean creatures. By this means the apostle was taught that he should not consider defiled the things God had cleansed. This prepared Peter to initiate the work of preaching the good news to uncircumcised Gentiles. Act 10. 9-23. 11. 5-12. Divine direction in the preaching work was also given to Paul by means of visions. At Troas, during Paul's second missionary tour, at night the apostle had a vision of a Macedonian man who entreated, "Step over into Macedonia and help us." Act 16. 8-12 Later, as a result of a reassuring vision by night in which the Lord spoke to him, the apostle remained in Corinth for a year and 6 months, teaching the word of God. Act 18. 8-11. Prophecy. Some visions from God were prophetic or were given to enable the recipient to interpret prophecies communicated in visions and dreams. The prophet Daniel had understanding in all sorts of visions and dreams. Da 1. 17 It was in a night vision that God revealed to Daniel the content and meaning of King Nebuchadnezzar's dream about an immense image pictorial of world powers. Da 2. 19, 28. Compare Da 4. 5, 10, 13, 20-22. In a prophetic dream and visions during the night, Daniel beheld 4 huge beasts coming out of the sea, indicating that 4 kings would stand up from the earth. Da 7. 1-3, 17 The prophet was also privileged to behold in vision someone like a son of man obtaining rulership, dignity, and kingdom from the Ancient of Days. Da 7. 13, 14. Visions from God were also received by such Bible writers as Isaiah 1. 1. 6. 1-13, Amos 7. 1-9, 12. 8. 1, 2, and Ezekiel 1. 1 Text to acute miritra longo, Visionary 1160 Prophecy on the day of Pentecost in 33 CE, when the Holy Spirit was bestowed upon followers of Jesus Christ, and they miraculously declared in many languages the magnificent things of God. Act 2. 1-4, 11, 15-17. Visionary. A man who had a claim to have visions from God regarding concealed or future matters. The Hebrew word for visionary is chomidl.za, from charmidl.za, meaning behold. Vision. Charmidl.za and its derivatives are employed with reference to seeing visions. New 24. 4. Issa 1. 1. 21. 2. 22. 1. S 13. 7. Da 8. 1. CC. some visionaries were false and were opposed by God. Isra 29. 10. Mic 3. 7 others were sent by Jehovah and spoke in his name. 2 Chi 17. 13. 2 Ch 33. 18. The term visionary is applied to several men, namely, Heman, Iddo, Hanani, Gad, Asaph, Jeduthun, and Amos. 1 Ch 25. 5. 2 Ch 12. 15. 19. 2. 29. 25, 30. 35. 15. And 7. 12. Some, such as Gad and Iddo, recorded their visions or wrote other accounts. 1 Ch 29. 29. 2 Ch 9. 29. 33. 19. Not all of Jehovah's prophets were visionaries. However, Gad was called both a prophet and David's visionary, apparently because at least some of the messages he received from God came by means of visions containing divine instruction or counsel for King David. 2 Sa 24. 11. 1 Ch 21. 9. Voice. The sounds uttered by persons in speaking, singing, and the like, as well as those made by animals, are denoted in Scripture by the Hebrew word kol, its Aramaic equivalent gul, and the Greek word phomidal.ne. Ge 3. 8, 10. 21. 17. Job 4. 10. Dar 4. 31. Mount 27. 46. Besides voice, kol can also denote thunder, sound, noise, news, and so forth. Ge 45. 16. X 9. 28. 20. 18. 32. 17. Similarly, phomidal.ne can have such meanings as sound, cry, speech sound, and blast, as well as voice. Jo 3. 8. Act 19. 34. 1 Co 14. 10, 11. Hob 12. 26. Re 8. 13. Spirit persons. The Apostle Paul speaks of the tongues of men and of angels, indicating that spirit persons have language and speech. 1 Co 13. 1 Angels, and Jehovah God himself, have been heard to speak in voice sounds and languages audible to men and understandable by them. But it is not to be supposed that such would be the voice with which they communicate with one another in the heavens, for an atmosphere such as exists around the earth is necessary for propagating the sound waves of voice that is audible and understandable to the human ear. The instances in which God or angels spoke in a voice in the hearing of men would therefore be a manifestation of their speeches transformed into sound waves, just as appearances of angels to the vision of man required either a materialization or a transmitting to the human mind of a pictorial image. Today even human scientists can convert the sound wave pattern of an individual's voice into electric impulses that can be transmitted to a receiver, which can change those impulses back to sounds closely resembling the individual's voice. Have any humans actually heard the voice of God himself? In 3 instances in the Bible record, Jehovah is reported as speaking audibly to humans. These are 1 at the time of Jesus' baptism 29 CE when Jehovah said, "This is my Son, the Beloved, whom I have approved." Both Jesus and John the Baptist undoubtedly heard this voice. Mount 3. 17. Mr. 1. 11. Luke 3. 22. 2 at Jesus' transfiguration 32 CE with the apostles Peter, James, and John present, when virtually the same words were uttered. Mount 17. 5. Mr. 9. 7. Lu 9. 35, 3 and 33 CE shortly before Jesus' last Passover, when, responding to Jesus' request that God glorify his name, a voice from heaven said, "I both glorified it and will glorify it again." The crowd thought that it had thundered or that an angel had text to a acute miritra longo. Voice 1161 Angelic voices. On other occasions when God spoke, angels were used as his representatives to provide the vocal manifestation. Angels represented God in speaking to Moses in Mount Horeb and to Israel, assembled near the foot of the mountain. X34. 4-7. 20. 1-17. Y3. 19. These angels sometimes did not present any visible appearance of a form, as when the voice came from the quaking, smoking mountain. X20. 18, 19. D4. 11, 12. Hope 12. 18, 19. At times they made visionary appearances. D8. 1, 15, 16. Re14. 15-18 and on several occasions materialized in human form to bring spoken messages to men. G18. 1-3, 20. 19. 1. Jos 5. 13-15. Hearing the voice of God. To hear the voice of God does not necessarily mean the hearing of a literal, audible voice. It more often means recognizing and hearing with obedience what God has caused to be written in His Word and transmitted through His earthly servants who represent Him. 1 Joe 2. 3, 4. Thus, voice is used as applying to every utterance coming forth through Jehovah's mouth, His commands whether presented to the individual verbally by God Himself or by angels or men, or in inspired writing. PS 103. 20. Mount 4. 4. See obedience. Hearing Jesus' voice. Jesus Christ spoke of Himself as the fine shepherd whose sheep listen to His voice. And the sheep follow Him, because they know His voice. They do not know the voice of strangers. Joe 10. 2-5, 11. Those who are Christ's sheep know His voice and that they recognize and acknowledge as true what Christ says as recorded in the Bible. They refuse to acknowledge the teaching of strangers, false shepherds. They listen to His voice in that they obey His commands as set forth in the Scriptures. Job 15. 10, 15. Since Christ Jesus is God's chief representative, who always listens to Jehovah's voice and speaks what Jehovah directs, the one following Christ will be in union with Jehovah. Job 5. 19. 1 Job 2. 6. The voice of the resurrected Jesus Christ. After Christ's resurrection and ascension, He appeared to Saul of Tarsus, later the Apostle Paul, speaking to him in a voice that Saul understood, but that the men accompanying him did not understand. Act 9. 1-9. 22. 6-11. 26. 12-18 at Acts 9. 7. The account states that the men with Saul heard a voice sound, da, ro, ftns. Here the Greek word phomidal.nes, the genitive case of phomidal.ne, is used, with the sense of hearing of the voice. This allows for the meaning that the men heard only the sound of the voice, but did not understand. When Paul later related the experience, he said that the men did not hear the voice of the one speaking. Act 22. 9. In this account the accusative objective case phomidal.ne is used. This can give the sense that, although the sound registered on their ears, they did not hear the voice as being distinct words that they understood, as did Saul, to whom Christ was speaking. The Apostle Paul said, when writing to the Thessalonian congregation about the gathering of God's anointed holy ones, the Lord Jesus Christ Himself will descend from heaven with a commanding call, with an archangel's voice and with God's trumpet. 1th 4. 16. The term archangel means chief angel or principal angel. Paul's expression archangel's voice evidently focuses attention on the authoritativeness of Jesus' voice of command. Jesus, when on earth, revealed the authority that God invested in Him, when He said, "For just as the Father has life in Himself, so He has granted also to the Son to have life in Himself. And He has given Him authority to do judging, because Son of Man He is." The hour is coming in which all those in the memorial tombs will hear His voice and come out. Job 5. 26-29. Use of human voice. Voice, along with language, is a gift of God. Therefore, the voice should be lifted in praise to God. This can be done by speaking the magnificent things of God, upbuilding others with o textoi acute miritra longo, Vashi 1162 figurative use. The anguish of Jerusalem's inhabitants in the face of a Babylonian attack is compared with the distressed voice of a sick woman, the voice of the daughter of Zion being likened to that of a woman giving birth to her first child. J 4:31 The enemy would reduce Jerusalem to such a low state that any utterances made with her voice would come up from her position of debasement as in the dust and would be like the low voice of a spirit medium. Issa 29:4 Through the prophet Jeremiah, God also prophesied that Egypt would be vanquished by the Babylonians, who would come in force as woodcutters, to chop her down. She would lie on the ground, deeply humbled.